Yeah.
Hello, hello, hello. I am here with Tara, and I am super excited about this topic because I hear about this all the time, especially in the world of female entrepreneurship, why successful people burn out. So, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are in corporate, which I think Tara niches down to a certain niche, but this is for everybody. This podcast is for anybody who is feeling this burnout sensation possibly creeping into their world. We are talking to you today. This is going to be so much fun. For those of you that don't know me, I am Sabrina Victoria, your host here at Her Talk Show. If you have not already subscribed, girl, get on that subscribe button. We are always learning new awesome things here on this platform. These podcasts are guaranteed to have you thinking differently about life. Let's just jump in.
Get ready, because today's guest is about to change the way you view your world. This is Her Talk Show, hosted by Sabrina Victoria.
You that watch Her Talk Show, you can see clearly that I am not in my studio today. And this is because I am moving and I am grooving the next couple of weeks. If you are listening live, which I already see you jumping on, yes, welcome. Hello. If you're on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you're at, so we can send you some love in the comments. Listen, we have had over 500 women grace this stage. We are adding another one to the list today. I actually think we're close to 600. Like, I need to recount this because I feel like I could start saying close to 600. I have today here in the StreamYard studio Tara. She is a wife, a mom, a former corporate executive and burnout survivor, and holistic burnout coach for high achieving, successful women. Ooh, I love we're talking to just women. She understands the cost of living beyond the breaking point is unsustainable. It's unsustainable, unrealistic, and life doesn't have to be that way. She helps women master balance and success to thrive beyond burnout through 90 days of self-discovery and healing using her proven rewire and restore framework. Ooh, I love that. Welcome, lady.
Yes, I'm excited to be here, Sabrina. Thank you for having me. I know we're going to get into some really great stuff, and it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. So, I hear, and I'm sure you're the actual coach, so I'm sure you hear this all the time. One of the things that I get all the time, because I'm constantly go, 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 is women coming to me being like, Sabrina, watch out for that burnout. So it's always in my world. Somebody's always chirping in my ear about it. How did you get to the point of like, whoa?
Yes, that's a great question. So I ran for years burnt out, and I had no idea that I was burnt out. Like, my boss was telling me, you're going to burn yourself out. My husband was, and I was just like pedal to the metal. Like, I thrived off of stress and resilience. Like, it was part of my kind of DNA, and I just prided myself almost in it. But when it finally hit me, just a quick story, but I was in Greece and I was on a 10-day vacation with my husband and my best friend, having the time of our life, good food, good wine, good conversation, beautiful country, right? And my friend, at the last day at dinner, she asked me, she's like, what was your favorite part of the trip? Thought about it. And of course, the food came to mind, and, the company and the conversation and the beautiful country and the islands and all of that. But what I actually told her was it was the peace and quiet. And it hurt. It was like a gut punch. And I really grieved like that response for probably the next week. Like, I really was like, Tara, was that your response? Like, really? Like, why wasn't it traveling with the love of your life or your best friend or any of that stuff? Like, I can get peace and quiet in my own home. Why the hell was I flying across the globe for it? So that was the first like crack in my life. Like, I had this picture perfect success, corporate life with a career and husband and all that, but I didn't feel successful. So yeah, because I couldn't show up for myself.
Wow. Okay. So you're in your world, you go on vacation, you have this realization for a moment, it sits with you for a week or so, but then you go right back to work, right?
Yes, yes. So that was kind of bouncing around in my head, went back to work, and then this is the ugly part. This is gonna get yeah, no, this is truth though. This is like full transparency. It wasn't even a week later. I was in my car on my way to the airport. I was traveling for work, and I got some really difficult news around my son. Okay, because he's been honestly, I'm pretty transparent about this, but we've been battling addiction in my oldest son's life for about 5 years. And I heard some really devastating news in that car ride to the airport. And with every fiber in me, like I wanted to turn the car around and be there for him, but I didn't have the capacity to do it. Like I didn't have the emotional capacity for it. Mind you, I'd just gotten back from like a vacation. So you would have thought that my tank would have been full, but I didn't like, and it really, it broke me in many ways. Like it basically kind of ensued like an emotional breakdown for me that lasted for about 3 days. And it was this very clear dissonance it was that moment, I think, where I realized that as I wasn't living my life the way that I wanted to live my life. I wasn't leaving enough margin in my day to actually show up for the people that mattered most to me. I wasn't even showing up for myself. So that was that moment that really cracked where I essentially came home from that business trip and I told my husband, I was like, I think I need a leave of absence, which of course there was all kinds of pressures I was putting on myself around that to like take that time away. Like, what are people going to think? Is this a sign of weakness? Does it mean I can't take the pressure? What are the optics of this for like my management, my leadership team at the company that I'd been at for 10 years? I had a great reputation. And of course, all those things were coming into my head, but I was adamant. Like, I was like, my son needs me. I need to help myself here. Like, something's not right. Like, I'm not living my life congruent to my values and what's most important to me. It's a lot.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know, but the
And
best
I don't
blessing,
know
honestly.
I don't know if you know this, but my fiance and I actually work in the recovery community. So we have a community together called Sober Society. So I totally understand those stories as far as the ups and downs of that. Wow. Okay. So you're sitting at the breaking point of what to do and taking a leave of absence. Where does the pivot happen as far as going from corporate to now being a business coach and working for yourself?
Yeah. So after when I took that leave of absence and I was kind of left picking up the pieces, right? I didn't immediately be like, oh, this is burnout. Like I didn't have this aha moment at the moment. But when I was really like, when the plate stopped spinning and I really was honest with myself, I started to realize that I had experienced burnout. And it wasn't just something that was a rhetorical, question, because I don't know that people sometimes always realize how significant and impactful burnout can be. And so all of that to say, I really dug in and invested in myself and my recovery. And I dug really deep. And the interesting thing was like, we know as women, like the things that we need to do, like we need to have better work-life balance and we need to say no more. And we need to eat the smoothies and do the yoga and all the things. Right. And I had known that for years. And so but when I really stopped to really dig into what happened to me, I realized that it went far deeper than I had even really realized, which I know we're going to get into. But I ultimately realized that I did have an emotional wound around my worth that I really needed to heal before I could set boundaries without guilt and be able to say no and prioritize the other areas of my life outside of my career. So because all that other stuff was just, I mean, they're great tools. Boundaries are important, but you really need to do the deep inner work to be able to set those boundaries really well, guilt-free, and keep them there so that they're sustainable. So long story short, dug in, I healed, really spent that time, and then realized I wanted to help other women like me have these breakthroughs. So they're not sacrificing their personal life, their energy, their fulfillment, their joy, their connections, their ability to be present, all the things that I had sacrificed for years. And now that I kind of had those blinders taken off, I could see very clearly how toxic it was. And I just was like, I have to stand for women that are like me, that may not even realize that they're burnout, right? Because a lot of times we pride ourselves in our success and, our resilience and how we can, and the crazy thing is a lot of times in even the work that I do with women, a lot of people think that they're not stressed. Like they, everybody will say things like, you look like you were handling it perfectly, right? Because we've learned to mask it, and kind of pull up our big girl panties and deal with it. But all the while we're dying inside a little bit. And so, yeah. So corporate woman of 20 years in the banking industry turned burnout coach for women, high achieving women specifically that are successful or relate to being people pleasers, perfectionists, and overfunctioners. So
totally. So I'd love to dig into this a little bit more, and I'm kind of projecting my own story onto this, which I'm very transparent about on all of my channels with all of my community, is anxiety. My whole life having anxiety, not knowing I had anxiety, and hating on people who claim to have anxiety. Like that is how much of a gap in unknowing something, in my world, having literally breakdowns on the floor, having to pull over on the side of the road because my entire body can't function, driving anxiety attacks. And then at the same time, my friend calling me up, claiming to have an anxiety attack, and me over here rolling my eyes, being like, girl, stop freaking being such a baby, right?
mm-hmm.
And then literally years of this, until probably about 6 years ago, having conversations with women, client, whatever it is, and all of a sudden an epiphany of like, I've been having anxiety attacks for 15 years, crazy ones, and just not knowing what it is. So I would love for you to have that same mindset, right? There are people around all over the world who are dealing with this possibly and don't even know, similar to your story. So what are a couple of signs? What are a couple of telltale signs that somebody is at the cusp or somebody is in the burnout and functioning as it, but just having no idea that they are? Are there a couple of things you could share with us?
Yeah. So the top 3 symptoms of burnout, and really for women, it's exhaustion, mental exhaustion specifically for women. Like just at the end of the day, just don't have anything left in the tank to even have a conversation. But physical exhaustion too, right? So mental and physical exhaustion. The second one is really cynicism. So this is where you're like, what's the point? Why even bother? You could go all over the place. Like I had that total, they change jobs thinking that will solve their burnout, and then they'll find themselves burnt out again. Oftentimes, if they're kind of carrying some of those extreme personalities with them to their next job. Not personalities as in multiple personalities. I'm sorry, extreme behaviors. I didn't like the way that came across, because that's not the case. But and then the last one is really around just feelings of ineffectiveness. Okay, so just not feeling enough. Maybe you're not showing up the way you used to. Maybe things are harder. Maybe things that used to be really simple are now hard for you. Maybe you're procrastinating now and you used to not procrastinate. Maybe you actually have some cognitive impairment around anxiety and focus issues that really are impacting your ability to show up for work the way that you used to. And then another kind of classic telltale sign is you just become like this unrecognizable version of yourself. Maybe you come home and you're drinking a couple of glasses of wine every night, or Maybe you're sleeping a lot, or maybe you're numbing out watching social media too much. Like those are things. Maybe you're irritable with the people around you. Maybe you used to love the career and now you hate it. So those are some of the things, like you just become unrecognizable.
Yes, definitely. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to so much of this. I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper I think most of this people understand and can relate to. Mental exhaustion, though. How would I even know? Like, if you came to me and you were like, "Are you mentally exhausted?"
Mhm.
I don't even know if I would understand what that meant. What is mental exhaustion?
Yeah. And it's also emotional exhaustion too. You can kind of throw them in the same camp, but where you basically, you maybe, I won't get through, I won't go through how to get mentally exhausted, but we'll just, the after effect of mental exhaustion. Basically, you don't want to engage with in conversation with people. You kind of just want to numb out. So you're mentally kind of fatigued of all the things, all the mental exercises that you were doing during the day. A lot of times it's because we're cramming so many things in our day. There could be a number of reasons why you're mentally exhausted, but that's essentially it, where you get home and like you don't want to talk to your partner. You don't want to talk to your kids. You don't want to do anything but sit in front of the TV and just kind of numb out, like until you go to sleep. And that's kind of what it is. It's like you don't want to put in any mental or emotional capacity into the other parts of your life and day.
How does somebody know the difference between somebody in your family being burned out and then somebody sitting in front of the TV and wanting to zone out because they're just lazy?
Yeah. Well, there's lots of other symptoms with the burnout. So, yeah, that's an interesting, because a lot of like, it's funny because I have husbands sometimes they're like, my wife's burnt out, and I'm trying to convince her she's burnt out. But it's like, so here's a sign. This will be a proof of one thing. My husband told me he felt like he felt like he was just another item on my to-do list. So, like, they start feeling like they're almost getting in the way of your priorities, and you can and of course that, guilt floods in for the person, right? Because and you're irritable. You're irritable with people. You don't wanna engage in that conversation in the evening. Um, so you're drinking more than, you should be. Like, it's pretty obvious, and a lot of times it's just where are you putting your best energy? Like, when I told my family that I was taking a leave of absence, almost everybody except for my mom was like, "Congratulations, you needed this." So they could all see it, but I couldn't. That I was really running myself down into the ground. And I had this like hypervigilance around my career and everything that I needed to be doing to make everybody happy in my career, and the people pleasing aspect of it. So it's very obvious for the people around you in many cases. So, and your relationships suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I think that this is an amazing list. For those of you that are listening live or on the replay, if you did not get the opportunity to write that down, some of these down, make sure you rewind. Lots and lots of good ways. So if you have somebody in your home who might be dealing with this, or maybe you yourself, definitely some really good examples of that. So I know, Tara, that you spoke briefly about realizing that your burnout sort of could have I don't remember exactly what you said. I don't want to put words in your mouth, came from emotional wounds.
Mhm.
Is this true to everybody, or is this your story and it also can relate to other people's story? Is it always from past emotional wounds?
Oh, no, I would not. I would be doing, yes. No, absolutely not. I would not say that at all. There are different reasons people burn out.
Okay.
I mean, some of the common reasons, like if you have a culture, if you work for a company that doesn't promote good, healthy work-life balance, that can cause a burnout. If you work for a difficult boss, if you have a lot of ambiguity with the role that you're in, like if you don't have a lot of clarity, that can cause burnout because you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing and it's not very clear. Lack of recognition can also cause burnout. Certain industries that are high performance can drive burnout. So I would say not always the case. And even stay-at-home moms and dads, like they can experience their own level of burnout. So I would absolutely say that people can experience burnout without having an emotional wound necessarily. So I guess that would be my niche, is really the ones that have an emotional wound around their worth, where they are striving to perform or prove their worth. And sometimes this is within our subconscious and we don't really recognize it right away. But some of the telltale signs are if you relate to being a high achiever, a people pleaser, a perfectionist, or an overfunctioner, sometimes that can be a signal that you might be dealing with something deeper.
Definitely makes sense. How did you come to realize that yours was from an emotional wound? Did you have a coach?
I have had many coaches over the years. And I have had therapists too. But I would say I was so resistant to admitting that I had experienced emotional wounding, which is also a kind of a nicer word. I mean, some trauma I don't use as much because it's a bit of a buzzword and it's thrown around a lot. But that's essentially what it is. And I had a huge, huge aversion to admitting that I had experienced trauma because I had lived in a less than perfect home growing up. I kind of was always like, what hasn't killed me made me stronger, whatever that phrase is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I was always very proud of, the getting where I was. And so for years, my sister told me that, that I had some baggage. She was like, you've got some stuff you should work through, Tara. And I was like, no, what's the point? Why would I even go revisit it? I don't want to wallow in it. Like, it's made me who I am today. Like, there was just a lot there, like limiting beliefs for me that kept me from wanting to acknowledge it. But when I did have that emotional breakdown, I was, like I said, forced to really face that music. And so I dug in and I worked, I've worked with coaches and therapists and I've done my own research around neuroscience and cognitive behavioral therapy and narrative medicine. And I know what works for me and I know, and what's working with my clients. So yeah, I think I answered your question. It was something
Yeah.
to that effect. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
how did I finally get there? I was forced to, I guess, because like I said, I had an aversion for a long time.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about limiting beliefs because I wanted to kind of pivot into that area. Before we do that, though, we do have a question from a live listener here. Adam says, what's the difference between experiencing a burnout and having a sensory overload due to overstimulation?
Well, in fairness, I don't know a lot about sensory overstimulation. So I don't know that I could really answer that in fairness, because I only know one side of that equation. Maybe I should know more about that if there's a connection between that and burnout. But gosh, I don't know. Sabrina, do you have any ideas, like based on
When
your
I think of like sensory overload, I'm thinking like the first thing that came to my head, which Adam, go ahead and continue if needed, if you're still there. I'm thinking of like the phone is on, the computer's on, the TV's on, like
uh,
sensory. There's just like, and then you got a baby crying in the background and your wife's yelling at you and
yeah,
just feeling like overwhelmed. Like that's the first thing that came to mind. And
yeah,
then just not wanting to talk to anybody, wanting to throw the whole thing away and just leave the house. Happening, every once in a while. Oh, he said yes, exactly that.
okay.
So I guess what would be the difference between having moments like that and then actual burnout?
Yeah. So what you just described was a state in which there were a lot of stressors involved, all coming at you at the same time, right? You've got all these things coming at you, lots of stress. So what I would say burnout is when you're in a prolonged state of stress, where you have almost normalized stress. So you're basically living your life in a state of chronic stress. So if the sensory overload a lot of what and again, just pardon me if I'm not saying this right, because I'm not familiar with that as much, but what I have found with people that have normalized like chronic stress in their life is they create a lot of the stressors for themselves. So, for example, because we perform well when we're in fight or flight mode, right? We have our superpowers, we have our adrenaline, we have, the cortisol, our heart rate goes up, we get super strong, we think really fast. Like these are temporary strengths of ours when we get into fight or flight. So you can essentially kind of become addicted to this state of fight or flight and create your own stress by, like, for example, what I would do would make exhaustive to-do lists for myself, or I'd make everything an urgent matter. Like if a thought came into my mind, I had to do it right then and there. So everything was an urgent matter. Maybe you're a perfectionist, so you're driving your own stress by trying to make everything perfect all the time. So those are just some examples of stressors that we create for ourselves that I refer to as illegitimate stressors. So I don't know, that was kind of a round and about, but I would just say prolonged state of stress is what causes burnout.
I'd like to actually dig into that. And I want to thank Adam for bringing this up too, because that kind of is making me think a little bit as far as boundaries. And I know, Tara, you were talking about boundaries earlier. How does that work as far as like you have a hard day at work, there's 1,000 things going on, and then you come home and you have 2 or 3 kids, and maybe your wife is to stay at home, maybe she works, and then you have dinner, and then you have to mow the lawn or do dishes, depending on where you're at, your responsibilities. How does somebody create some boundaries so that there is some breathing room? Because I think also it's not just like a lot of times when we think of burnout, we think of like work. It's all because of work. But the more that I'm thinking about it, and even with this example that Adam kind of gave here, couldn't it be life? Like your life is burning you out? And how do you begin to set boundaries around like your spouse and your children?
Yes. Yeah. So you're exactly right. Like, and that's a lot of misconception too. Sometimes people think you have to be overworking to get burnout, and that's not necessarily true either. So it is just generally about stress from any direction of your life, whether you're at work or a stay-at-home parent. So that is very true. So solving for burnout, you have to manage and reduce stress, and then you have to also restore the other side of the equation, which is things that you love about life, like living your life congruent to your values, showing up for yourself. Is your family your part of your value system? And are you showing up for them the way you want to show up for them, right? So it's kind of balancing the equation of the reducing and managing stress well, but then also making sure that you're showing up for the other areas of your life, whatever that might be. So to your question around boundaries, I'll go back. Boundaries are a great tool, and they're a skill, and they're something that we can learn. But for us to really execute them well, guilt-free, sustainably, we need to heal that worth wound if you are struggling with that. Now, again, we already talked too about the fact that you don't have to have a worth wound or an emotional wound to experience burnout. So you can still learn boundaries. They have to be unique to you. What's really important about boundaries is understanding the why behind your boundary, making it about you and what you're trying to protect, not about the other person. And so things like learning how to say no, and there's all kinds of things around that, and then practice. And also know that it's going to be uncomfortable at first when you're not used to setting boundaries. There's going to be a level of uncomfort. So that means you're doing it right, and that's okay.
Beautiful. Definitely. Adam says, when my partner was pregnant, who has now given birth, I informed her that I'd support her, especially with our 2 autistic kids and the newborn, but I refused to stop doing things for me.
Yes. Yeah. You have to show up for you.
Definitely.
Because you can't pour from an empty cup. Yeah.
Good exactly. For you, exactly. So I'd like to kind of thank you, Adam, for those comments. I would love to talk briefly about limiting beliefs. For me, especially, this is a huge, and I've become more and more aware of this through my podcasting, actually, of how much of my world is based upon beliefs that I have that I see as truth, but aren't true. Um, so I would love for you to talk a little bit maybe about like a limiting belief that maybe you see often in the
Mhm.
area of burnout. Since this is your realm, I'm sure there's one or two limiting beliefs that you continue to see over and over again. And then what is a step out? What is a tool or a modality that someone can use to start to pivot out of this cycle of burnout?
Yes, I love that question. So I can go all kinds of places with this, but all right. So limiting beliefs, I like to sometimes refer to them as myths too. But so a lot of things, this is true for me personally, and what I have found with working with women. One is they feel like admitting to burnout is a sign of weakness. That is a limiting belief because that keeps them exactly where they are, stuck in burnout, refusing to make changes. Okay, because the silver lining here is the beauty about if you have experienced trauma or an emotional wound is it's not what happened to you. It's that residual impact that you carry with you in your subconscious and in your nervous system. And so what that means is you can actually heal from that. You can actually heal from that. And you can build skills and disciplines for yourself through that healing to show up in a better way for yourself and not be, have this imbalance that creates the burnout, right? So that's the beauty of it. So if they refuse to admit that they're burnt out and that it is a sign of weakness, or that it means they can't take the pressure because maybe they work in a culture of, all men, and, it would look bad if they admitted to burnout or something like that. That just keeps them stuck in burnout. So those are a couple. Another one would be that they should be able to figure this out on their own. Like, I should just be able to figure this out. It's just like work-life balance, right? Like better boundaries, better time management. I've got all the books. I don't know how many women that I've talked to, they're like, I've got all the books, right? I know I've intellectualized it to the nth degree. And a lot of times we like to intellectualize things, but it's really getting down into your heart and feeling and healing. One of the things I say is reveal it, feel it, and heal it. And that's where that's where the transformation comes. And so that would be, another limiting belief. And then around the trauma, again, like it means that maybe there's a limiting belief around, maybe people have an aversion to feeling like if they admitted that they experienced some injustice as a child, that they're blaming their parents. Like that is a big thing. Like, well, my parents did the best they can. That was for me. Like, I know my mom did the best she could. She was a single mom for a long time. She had her own issues. She was in survival mode herself, but that doesn't mean that it didn't impact me in a traumatic way, right? Even though she did her best, I can acknowledge the two exist. So I think that that's a limiting belief for people sometimes, saying, well, I don't relate to having experienced trauma. But again, it's just something that's layered into your subconscious, and it could be something you don't even remember, and you don't have to remember it to have experienced it and to have a residual impact on your day to day. So those are a couple. I have more, but I dumped a lot on you there. So those are a few. But and yeah, like I just think it's okay to get help. Like that's a lot of times if you're a people pleaser, you're so worried about helping everybody else, you're not showing up for yourself. And so taking action and saying, look, I'm worth this, and I want to make the changes and invest in this, and so that I can show up better for the people around me, because you're not doing anybody a service if you're showing up burnt out and exhausted and irritable to the people around you. So
For sure. So I want to talk, I don't know if I've read this in here or if I'm just making this up, but I'm pretty sure at some point, correct me if I'm wrong, we said something about personalities. Certain types of personalities are more prone to burnout. Is that a thing, or did I just make that up?
No, you're right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, what are the personalities? What personalities are more prone to burnout than others?
Yeah. So, And personalities is a unique where there can be some debate around how the use of personalities, but whether it's inherent or something if it's a nature or nurture thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is a personality a nature or nurture thing? That's a debate, I think. But setting that aside, high achiever, overfunctioner, people pleaser, and perfectionists are some of the strong kind of personality types that people might relate to. So that's one. There are also certain industries that are predisposed to burning out, like healthcare is one of them. Academics is huge. Service industries, architecture, IT, finance, like some of those professions, I'm missing some, but just lend themselves, like investment banking. Sometimes, those are some that just really lend themselves because there's just it's a grind culture in some of those. So they just, the environment is pretty tough there, but you can still build resilience to stress and manage yourself in those situations too. So, and then neurodivergent individuals too are also more inclined to burning out as well. People with ADD or ADHD, just the stimulation and the thinking and things like that are really lending themselves to burning out. So those are a few. And moms, right? Because, if they're busy career women or just moms in general, but you load on a busy, successful career and you've got kids at home and if you're pulling a lot of the domestic responsibilities, which is true still today from a statistical standpoint, it's likely that you might burn out because it's all the stressors, right? Not just the work ones, but if you have toddlers at home and, you've got a high demand career, then there's lots of stress involved. So.
Yes. And what happens if you're in burnout and you just keep going, right? There's people that have to pay bills. There's single moms. Like I did the whole single mom thing for a really long time, working my butt off, trying to make money literally on 3 hours of sleep for years, trying to get my business rolling to pay the bills, just to like survive. Mm-hmm. There's people out there that feel, right, limiting beliefs, that they have to keep rolling. They can't stop. So what happens? Does something happen if we continue through burnout and keep pushing ourselves? What's the threshold?
Yeah. And I love that you said that they're limiting beliefs because there's always something you can do. There's always something within your control, even if you don't leave the job. Like even if you stay at the job with the boss that doesn't promote good work-life balance, like you can still make changes in the way that you show up. So, and oftentimes you can't quit your job, right? Like times, people have to work, I mean, that's not always an option. Like I took a leave of absence. It was an option for me, but that is not the case in many cases. So you have to work through it. But what happens if you don't admit to burnout and make changes? So two things can happen. You can stay stuck in burnout for maybe 10 years, 20 years, giving everything you got to a career and not showing up for yourself and living chronically stressed where you can't shut off work and be present and your relationships suffer, et cetera, et cetera. Sure, you could probably do that for 10, 20 years, but it's at a great cost. It's at a great cost. And I would argue too, at some point, something will crack. You'll have some kind of, I don't want to manifest anything, but something, I had my emotional breakdown. Like I was humming along. I thought I had it figured out. And then I had my emotional breakdown, which was honestly one of my greatest blessings in hindsight, because it really stopped me in my tracks. But the thing is, you can run along for long enough, but I would just urge you to just really ask yourself, what is this costing me? And am I okay with this?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you did touch on also earlier on, which I want to read Donita's comment here. But you were talking about everyone in our life becoming an item on a to-do list
Mhm.
And when you are cynical
Mhm.
and drinking wine in excess, yeah, there's bound to be some repercussions that start to happen in the realm of even your personal life, even if it is work.
And I'll
Uh,
also say, Sabrina, too, I'm sorry to interrupt, but generational impact.
mm,
Because
mm,
if you are not showing up for yourself emotionally,
yeah.
physically, mentally, if you're running at such a speed that you can't be emotionally present for yourself, do you feel like you're supporting your kids emotionally?
Mm,
And when you
yeah.
think about the basic needs of children, and this goes down the trauma route, but what are our basic needs as young children? We have a physical need to have a roof over our head and food in our mouth, but we also have emotional needs. We have a need to feel unconditionally loved, validated, and connected to. And so if you don't, and that's where I experienced my emotional wound, because I had a single mom that wasn't emotionally, she wasn't showing up for herself. And so I didn't get my emotional needs met because of that. It wasn't something very overt like physical abuse that I experienced. And that, I think, is a part of the limiting belief. Is it can be just something as simple as growing up with parents that have maybe mental disorders of their own, or having an alcoholic parent, or having a parent that gives you the silent treatment when you misbehave, or only validates you or approves you and praises you based on achievements. That's going to create something within inside of your subconscious that drives you to behave a certain way and to think a certain way. So I think I got off track there, but I can't even remember your question now, Sabrina, but take it from here.
That was great. All really good information. Can you read Donita's comment?
Yes. Hey, Donita. I had 3 in diapers at one point while trying to run a home-based business. Okay. Definitely got burnout and had to keep going the best I could with little support. It was hard. Eventually getting help was huge. Yes. I love that. You had your breakthrough. Awesome. I love that. I'm curious to know what kind of help you got. Would love to hear what you got there, and what breakthroughs you had. But I'm so happy for you, Donita.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So, I mean, this has been great. I could keep going for days on this, but absolutely phenomenal. Definitely understand the signs of it, some ways of which to overcome it, and the cost of it, which I think are the 3 main points when it comes to burnout. So appreciate you being here. We have a ton of people watching live. So thank you for being here, by the way, live. She said she saw a counselor.
Oh, good.
I would love for you, as we kind of start to wrap up here. Obviously, there's people that are resonating with what you're saying. They are, feeling pulled to listen. Obviously, we know you work in the area of burnout, but can you tell us what specifically you do and who specifically should be reaching out to you? Who do you help?
Yes, yes. So what I specifically do is I help high achieving women thrive beyond burnout in 90 days. Okay.
Mm,
So we learn to master balance and success. So people that are wanting to be successful, career oriented people, they want to have their cake and eat it too, but they don't want to sacrifice their personal life and their well being. So I help them master that balance and success. And I help them do that in my 90-day program through self-discovery and healing, really back down to that, your worth wound. We heal that. We rewrite our worth narrative. We rewire our thoughts. So we really become great thought managers. We really start beginning to manage our thoughts well. We set beautiful boundaries. We do some value work together. We set some restoration markers for ourselves to really restore ourselves to who we're supposed to be, that whole and happy person through that healing. So there's lots of work that goes into that, but it's a one-to-one relationship throughout my program. I have my Soulful Academy that's part of that, but the rubber really hits the road when we work together. And obviously, if I've experienced it, I've walked in their shoes. I'm now on the other side of burnout. And so I really bring that passion and commitment, and accountability is huge. That's really big. Accountability is big for the women that I work with. And Donita mentioned working with a counselor, and I still continue to see a counselor, and I love counselors, but I will just throw one little comment out there. So obviously the more support, the better if you're experiencing burnout. And I do offer some things around the accountability piece that that the therapist may not always offer. And so just one kind of classic case just mentioned last week, I was on with my client in the second session. She made the comment, she says, gosh, she says, we've made more progress in the last 2 weeks, just 2 weeks. She'd only been working with me 2 weeks, she said, than I had with her therapist. So I thought that was really powerful. And again, this isn't a dig, because I love my therapist and I still go to her. But all that to say is there is value working with a coach in addition to a therapist, I believe, to have had that walk alongside that you've walked, kind of been in your shoes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I moved from a counselor to a life coach, which just deepened my healing. Perfect. Love that. Yes. Awesome. All right. We're on the same page.
And I totally agree. I hear that time and time again, the differences between a therapist and a life coach. And I think that there is, they do their own thing, right? So, everyone's different. And I think that there's certain times when we need certain ones to really help us push us over, the hurdles or the walls that we come up against. I would love for you to, where can people find you? Obviously, they're resonating. Is there a website? Is there social media? Where do you hang out? Where can people find you?
Yes, let me pull it up. So I have a website. The easiest way to probably get to it versus me reading it out to you is I have Instagram. So my Instagram handle, it's just Tara Odell. So right there on the screen. And then it's _burnout_coach. So you'll find me there. I also have a fabulous Facebook group that's just booming right now. I get in there with trainings every week. We support each other. We encourage each other. So you'll want to look for that. It's just called the Soulful Career Community. Soulful Career Community. My program is the Soulful Career Program. So just look up that Soulful Career Community in Facebook. And I'm also on TikTok. So if you're a TikToker, I'm there. My handle is Tara Odell. I'm sorry, it's Tara_Odell after burnout. So they can find me. Just Tara Odell on TikTok or Instagram, burnout. Just put some version of that and you'll find it. There you go.
Is that the name of your Facebook group? Is that spelled right?
You got it,
Okay.
girl. You're right on there. Would love for y'all to join my community if you're a high achieving woman struggling with burnout.
Beautiful. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic, Tara. I so totally appreciate you being here and speaking with us on this subject. For those of you that resonated with all the goodness that was shared today, make sure you check out Tara, visit her on her Instagram, her Facebook group. We'd love to connect people here on this platform in order to make sure that we all continue to rise. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'd love that. If you're experiencing burnout, I just would love to say that I see you and I know how hard it is. And I know how deep it feels and hurts, like to feel like you're not showing up for you and the people that you love. And I just encourage you to just pursue healing and recovery for yourself. I promise it exists. It's there. It takes some work, but it's totally worth it. And it will pay dividends for a lifetime. And you are worth it. Like you are worth it. And that's all I'll say.
Absolutely. I concur on all fronts.
Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely lovely. This brings us to an end of yet another incredible episode of Her Talk Show. Thank you, Tara, for sharing your wisdom and inspiring us all. To our dedicated listeners, thank you for staying with us until the very end. Remember to follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. I invite you to join our amazing community, Her Nation, where we continue to uplift each other by having amazing conversations just like this one. Until